everybody to today's utility committee meeting. Mr. Marshall, Mr. Smith, and myself, members of the committee, the rest of the council is here. And certainly welcome everybody. Mr. Marshall, Mr. Smith, I believe both are. When Mr. Marshall's here, we can conduct business. But anyway, we had two items on the agenda. One was to hear from the LMGA concerning prepaid gas presentation, which we will be unable to hear due to Senator Adley not being able to be here. And the other was a presentation of the administration on utility rates, and we were a bit ambitious on that. We're not quite through with getting that cleaned up for presentation, and hopefully in 2 weeks.
It may be 4.
Okay, 2 to 4 weeks we'll do that, and we'll reschedule it at that time. But under any other business, Mr. Cannella is here, and he's going to go over with us now a new policy that we've implemented in our rates for electricity. We discussed it going way back, probably, 2 years ago, and discussed a way to level the rates and still charge a fair price for them by averaging the rates over a 6-month period. And then we'll have to adjust like we always do once a year. But it is implemented, and we're watching it very closely, and it is having an effect on our bills, and I'm going to let Mr. Cannella delve off into it and explain exactly what we're doing.
This is actually going to be the second month that we've started the 6-month average bill for fuel costs. Last month, of course, we averaged over 6 months. Our actual fuel cost was around $64.66 per megawatt, and we billed $67.92, which is part of that averaging. And now this month, the actual fuel cost is $80.06 a megawatt, and we're billing $71.94 a megawatt, which you can see that it would have been a tremendous spike in the fuel costs, and now it's leveled off. Of course, that's not a reduction at all. That cost is still going to be there. It's just going to be averaged out over time. So 1 month it may be cheaper, but the fuel cost is a little bit higher, and then other months it's going to be really high, and then it may be a little bit lower. It just averages it out. It keeps that so-called shock, so to speak, when you have those averages like that. One of the reasons that the fuel cost is high at this time is that CLECO has their Dolly Hills plant down for maintenance repairs. They've had it down for about 11 weeks, and that's their solid fuel production. It is back online, or should be back online, and we'll be seeing those costs go down somewhat. But averaging out, our fuel cost was a little higher this time. But with the average fuel cost, the way we're billing it, it's not going to be such a tremendous impact to the citizens.
And in the long run, everybody will be paying the total the same. It's just spread out over a period of time by averaging the 6 months. Again, what this does for us, like we did, I guess it was end of last summer, last fall, when the prices went crazy, and we had those huge spikes, and utility bills just went through the roof to where so many people couldn't afford them. Instead of that happening in that one single month, where it was a $12 effect, now it'll be $2 over 6 months. And then by law, and I don't know exactly what this is, but maybe Mr. Johnson or one of the city attorneys that's more familiar, Mr. Cannella probably is more familiar, once a year we have to make an annual adjustment for charges, where if we've miscalculated or anything else, the cost, sometimes it's a credit to the people and it's spread out over the next year, sometimes it's a charge. But it defines exactly what the city can do and what we can make, and it levels it back out.
David Crutchfield is in responsible charge of those issues. But
okay. Well, I'm sure there's a much better explanation than I just gave, but it's essentially that. Does anybody have any questions, or anybody care to make comment?
In our reporting, are we going to show our costs versus other municipalities that are like ours? What I'm interested in is quite frankly, to find out who's doing the best job when it comes to maintaining low utility costs among municipalities, particularly among municipalities that are like kind and quality of Central Louisiana, Alexandria. I want to make sure that our rates, and I hear it all the time, are not as high as the folk I'm talking to say they are, as compared to even a supplier that we're using. I also would like to see how we're trending, the current rates as compared to the rates last year for the same time, and any projected rates that we may be able to give to the public. I just want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can, and if we're comparing, I know it's not necessarily apples to apples and oranges to oranges, but if we have a municipality out there that's really getting low-cost utilities to their ratepayers, and I want to know what they're doing. I'd like to see us compare.
Are you more interested in the rate portion or the fuel cost portion, or both?
I'm interested in the bottom line. The fuel cost, of course, drives the rate, but I'm interested in all of it because when you have a high fuel cost, then certainly you're going to have a higher rate charge. But I'm looking at the complete package as it relates to our utilities.
One other thing that we need to add to that is that, as Ms. Lawson's certainly correct in his inquisitive nature, and getting the information back to us would be something that would be real good. But the other thing that we need to look at, since ours is a municipality and a municipal rate, and we will be comparing versus people such as Pineville and others, is we need to look at the absolute total utility package to a homeowner or to a business. And we need to do that because we provide all of the services. We provide the water, we provide the sewage, we provide the gas, we provide the garbage in most instances, and the electricity. So it's somewhat unfair to just look at one portion of the bill and say that the electrical cost is this for Alexandria and this for Mansfield, because when you compare everything, you get certainly a different number. So if we do that, we need to look at the whole thing both comprehensively and each individual utility. That's a big bite to chew.
We can.
And also, I would like to look at, on the bottom side too, on the rates for the business sector of our community, based on deposits, based on a new business that comes into our city community versus what the past owner or manager of a business paid when he opened up a business in our city. For example, $4,000 versus $8,000. Our new deposits based on any rate that that person may incur.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, but I know that relates to Mr. Crutchfield, but also, that's part of the bottom line. I think if you and Mr. Crutchfield can compare the analysis to that effect, I think it would be a good tie-in to what you're reporting on when you come back.
And I can report on that, but the rates that you're specifically talking about are rates set by the city council.
Yeah, I think it's twice the usage of the previous occupant.
Now, I mean, that's something that this body would have to want to change. We're just following the codes that are in the...
I think what Roosevelt wants, and we all want to just know what it is. It may have been something that was passed before he was ever on council, and probably before I was on council. But those are just general things that we need to look at. And anybody else have any business?
And along those same lines, we can make this comparison and find out if we need to change something that we're doing to enhance businesses. If we're talking about a person coming into a mom and pop business coming online, and utility rates might be, a deposit might be a hindrance Well, we might want to look at that, and see if we can help them along.
We'll throw another element in there because we certainly want to look at the other end of the spectrum, at least of these.
Well, no, me, that's pretty good.
Jack and I know we've been talking about without saying too much, but there are folk that are literally impoverished and utility bills take up their entire check. I want to see what offerings we can maybe provide for indigent ratepayers at maybe a lower base rate for them so that we can make this necessary commodity a little bit more affordable for the indigent.
Okay, is any other business? Administration have anything? Nothing. Marcus, thank you very much. We will keep the citizenry posted as to how this is progressing, and of course, it'll be reflected in your bills, and you're trying to be able to see it. Any persons from the media that would want to have a more explicit explanation, I'm sure Mr. Cannell will be happy to show you exactly what we're doing, so it will be out there for everybody to see. There being no further business before the Utility Committee, we stand adjourned, and we'll move to the next committee meeting.
Didn't have any business.
Call the Personnel and Insurance Committee meeting to order. President of the committee, Mr. Marshall, absent, Mr. Silver, other members of the Council of Administration. The first item we'd like to hear is, at this time, we would like to hear from Reverend Victor White Sr. The item will be on the renting of the Bolton Avenue Community Center.
Mayor and President, City Council member, I appreciate you all allowing me the opportunity to come before you all. And I wanted to look on page 11, actually, the item I've attempted to rent the use of the Bolton Avenue Community Center in the city ordinance. I was sent a copy of the city ordinance. And at the bottom, what they have the arrow, they showed me the arrow where it says that the non-profit or civic organization would be exempt for that. And if you go back to page 1, and it shows the certificate in page 2, where we filed with the state of Louisiana for non-profit status. And so, and then I came and I was told again that it meant federal 501c. And so I came and I spoke with the city attorney, Mr. Johnson, and they showed me again that it said that in the city ordinance that it states that it has to be a formal letter, 501c. And I told them, well, I've looked up and down in the city ordinance and I cannot see where it says federal, it just states non-profit or civic organization. And again, I asked for an opinion, and I was told again by Mr. Johnson that he didn't send for me. He said, I did not send for you, and I asked for a letter. Would he give that to me in writing? And he said, well, all the stuff I have on my desk, you're not the only person that I have to attend to. I said, I understand that. I was asking you, could you do that? Didn't ask for you to do it right now. I just asked for it, and then so we had another conversation after that, and again, they're saying that the ordinance states federal 501c. And it doesn't state that, it just says non-profit or civic organization.
Okay, at this time, I would like to hear from the administration concerning this matter.
Address that, Mr. Johnson. Members, when Reverend White came to see me, he had also spoken previously with Ms. Angel Pittman, who is the administration representative over in Building Services. I spoke to her, and she advised me that it's been the practice of this administration, as well as the two previous city attorneys, to require proof of tax-exempt status before we waive the fees. I explained to Mr. White that anyone could come in here and say, I have a church, waive the fees. The ordinance that he's referring to, it does just say exempt, but I would think that the full force and effect of what the council intended when this ordinance was enacted could be carried out by requiring some documentation, which is not an onerous burden. It's something that Ms. Pittman will tell you is required by every organization. His group was not singled out. Every single group that comes in here, church, civic organization, whatever it is, if they want waiver of the fees, all they have to do is produce the letter from the IRS saying that that you're tax exempt. On the form that you fill out to get the waiver of the fees, it says proof of IRS letter must be attached to this form. If Mr. White wants to argue about the technicality, if y'all want to give him a variance, that's up to y'all. What I would suggest we do is we just make a technical amendment to 26 section 1 where we say proof of tax exempt status from the Internal Revenue Service will be required prior to any waiver of fees, and then we won't have this issue in the future.
Mr. Marshall.
Mr. Johnson, let me put it like this. Bolton Avenue Community Center is in my district. I don't have a problem with Reverend White Church.
I don't have a problem with this church either.
There are neighborhood organizations that use this community center that don't have 501c3s or C4s or whatever. But we let neighborhood organizations use the community centers for neighborhood meetings they like. And I feel that, you know, let the church use it. As long as it's not being any funds, there's no funds transferred. They're not making any money, they're not charging anything for their fees. As long as it's free and open to the public, that's what a community center is for. Those are my sentiments on it, and I don't think we need to go, because a lot of nonprofit or neighborhood organizations don't have 501c3s. And they're doing a lot of things in the neighborhood and in the community. Let's keep the community centers for the community.
That's a decision for this council to make.
Those are my sentiments.
My only concern was that we document that these groups are in fact nonprofit organizations.
Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, it's kind of vague. I agree with Reverend White. It says nonprofit and civic organizations, which, does this also, would you suggest the C6 be excluded organizations?
Not necessarily.
So a C6, it would be maybe a nonprofit. David, you're going to have to correct me on this.
There's some taxable
but it would be
nonprofits,
some,
yeah.
right. So I think we need to clean it up.
Why don't we
And I'm
clean
not-
up the ordinance
Yeah, that's what
in
I'm
its
saying.
entirety? I'm going to tell y'all from our standpoint, Kay and mine, we've been trying to work with it for months, and it's unworkable as it's written. I think it just got amended over the years and bits and pieces moved around. One community center is treated differently than others. We'd just like to clean up the whole thing, and that would make it easy.
I do think we need to clean it up, and that's what I'm saying, but I'm not
But we
opposed to
couldn't
it.
give the reverend a variance. Only this body can vary from an existing ordinance. The administration was not comfortable saying that they're going to treat Reverend White differently than someone else if the ordinance is written as it's written. We didn't write the ordinance.
Right, and
It's the council's
the
ordinance.
historical practice of the city has been to require some documentation. Ms. Pittman is here from administration if you have any questions for her. Come forward, please, ma'am.
What's our position with C6 organizations?
I've not heard of that, I'm sorry. The C6.
Could you come to the podium?
Some of your civic organizations are probably, several of them are C6.
When
Not
they,
necessarily nonprofits, but they're organizations that are not.
the only documentation that we require is the IRS exemption letter. When they fill out the community meeting request form, it has 3 different,
But you're saying it has to be strictly a 501c3, as you appreciate it.
it is the IRS exemption letter, which does state that they are 501c3 status.
That would bump a lot of city
Civic
organizations.
organizations are exempt.
Wait, just one second. One thing I would like, as we conduct this meeting, those who would like to speak, either go to the podium or one of the families, there's a whole lot of conversation going on because this is being watched and recorded on Channel 4 by our audience. Thank you.
Ms. Pittman, has every other group, every single group who's submitted that form also given you the IRS letter?
If they have it, yes, they do. It's a category, it's community meeting, governmental, or nonprofit.
My
Those are the
question
three
is,
categories that
Are
we...
you singling out Mr. White
No,
as
sir.
special treatment, or are you treating him more harshly than any other group?
I hope not, no. I've asked him for his IRS exemption letter, which asked him when he filled out the initial community meeting request form, and he said that he applied for it. So he did not have it then. And he did provide his state exemption, yes. But from the past, they require the IRS exemption letter.
Okay, Ms. Lawson, do you have something?
I was just going to make the comment.
Can you go to the podium? Thank you.
Special privileges.
Good afternoon. Mariel Lawson with Public Works Division. I was just going to reiterate, if I'm not mistaken, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, civic organizations in which you were asking about are also exempt, and that would include the other part of the C that you were referring to. Sorry.
But we require documentation
That's
of their
correct.
IRS status
That is correct.
before we waive the fees, correct?
That is correct.
Every single group.
That is correct.
Okay.
So even if it were C6,
Yeah. The C6 are required to produce their documentation as well, and that would include a lot of fraternal and sorority organizations.
Mr. Fowler, do you have thoughts?
I can certainly understand the quandary that it puts us in to have rules and so forth that, you know, we need to abide by, but also we can waive those in certain instances. If we have an ordinance on the books that is proved to be difficult to work with in administering the ordinance, then the ordinance needs to be addressed. And we certainly need to do that. And then we need to try to help this gentleman as best we can by maybe doing a variance tonight with the administration's approval, and well, they don't need your approval, do they? But anyway, to let them go ahead with this and get this thing cleaned up where it's right and workable, and we don't end up in a convoluted process like this again. It needs to be where it's easily workable for everybody, and it needs to be, first of all, fair to every organization that comes forward, whether it's a church or a Ducks Unlimited meeting or whatever it is. It's not the organization that's meeting there, but the process and the organization's status as nonprofit or whatever. And if we have a difficult ordinance to deal with, we need to correct that.
Mr. Fowler, it is difficult. There are inconsistent definitions for the same items. Mary and I have noted those, Kay and I have. And the only cautionary note I would have, and you hit it on the head, if the ordinance is unworkable, you should correct it. Although the body has the authority to issue variances, as you know, the only negative to that is when you issue a variance, you are in fact singling out a person, and you do open yourself to someone else coming in and saying, and so I'm just making the recommendation that it is better to correct the ordinance than do variances when the opportunity can be done quickly and efficiently. That is the better route to take.
I agree. But it still leaves him with a problem.
Yes, sir.
And my feeling would be, and looking at he's a church and applied, that he certainly will qualify certainly soon, and maybe that just for this period of time. How long do you think it'll take us to rewrite this? A couple of weeks?
We can have it ready for the next meeting.
Okay, and if you need to have some information going back and forth, we can do that, and through Mr. Johnson and whatever, and that would be my preference.
Mr. Hall, then Mr. Marshall.
I feel at this time, looking at it, it was vague, but you still fit in the criteria of what was in our ordinance. We may as well go on and permit the variance and let him go on. It's not like he was gonna wait 2 weeks and you need
I agree.
to be there Sunday. Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
And I think your recommendation, based on what we're saying, is for to go ahead and commit the variance to him and for the administration to come back at the next council meeting with their recommendation based on any changes that might be made in respect to that ordinance.
So
Second.
Mr. Johnson, before you close, I just want to say to Mr. White, it was not the intent of the city attorney's office or the administration in any way to offend you or to single you out or harass you. It was just a historical practice that I inherited when I came here, and I wish you the best.
And one last note, other municipalities, Lake Charles included, has decided that they're going to start charging fees across the board to get out of this interpretation quandary. And guys, y'all don't have to do it every day, and we do. There are tons of different organizations that meet one aspect and then don't meet another, and then you have 3 different things you're looking at. What we're talking about here was $20 an hour for use. So I just want to put it in perspective. We can either move toward maybe charging across the board, then you get out of the interpretation game, and it follows what Mr. Marshall already said very well, and that's this. We built the facilities with public money already meeting that public purpose and created under the charter, and so then you get to proportionality. At what point you need to charge some nominal fee just to meet people cleaning it up and making sure is sort of up to you, but you ought to also consider that maybe you have nominal fees, but across the board for everyone, and maybe only 3 tiers, and then you get out of the game of saying one or another. And I know, Mr. Marshall, we went through this earlier this year when a sorority wanted to do something that didn't quite fit what your interpretation was, and there was an indication by you that the sorority shouldn't be able to use Bolton Community Center, and we had to tell these folks no. So to make it clean, we ought to look at everything, Myron, as you say sometimes, across the board, and let's give you some alternatives by the next meeting.
But Mayor, my whole thought was, as you remember, the organization was using it as a fundraiser. And they were, that particular...
For nonprofits,
Yeah,
Mr.
for a
Marshall.
nonprofit, yeah. But they had a nonprofit status, but they were using it, they were raising funds. In this case, Reverend White is not raising funds there. He's not asking for, you know...
You better leave it alone while you're in.
Reading the ordinance, that could have made an argument, and the woman did make an argument that because she was raising money as a civic organization, as Mr. Hobbs pointed out, you can easily read the ordinance to say it's exempt anyway because it's raising money for a charitable purpose. So that doesn't cure our problem at all.
And just one more thing along that line, I want to let you know that we spend a lot of time and a lot of effort on these requests, and just like there was some quandary over the sorority using the facility, just like there was over this church issue without the nonprofit status available, we spend a lot of time that we could be using to do things that address the needs of our citizens in a better way. Every day we're faced with these questions. And so if we charge everybody $20 an hour nominal fee, we get out of the business of trying to interpret and you know, well, they meet it here, they don't there, what do you think about this? We eliminate that.
I'd like to see an exception, one exception to it is the neighborhood organization.
Which the buildings were designed to be for, yes, sir.
Right.
I understand.
Okay.
Neighborhood organizations are exempt from the fees. But if you want to...
And all things that was discussed in these matters in 2 weeks, can y'all bring that back based on what was discussed in relative to these matters? Thank you for that item, and we'll move on the agenda.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, whatever business we need to do tonight as a council to help this gentleman, could you see to it that we have that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll move to item number 2 on the agenda. Is she here? No, sorry, item number 3, I think we have someone that's to leave. Let's go to item number 3. To hear from the administration concerning personnel concerning city parks. At this time, I would like to hear from Public Works, Mr. Jody White. And this is a sort of like a follow-up to what we discussed early on concerning maintenance, upkeep, personnel with city parks. At this time, we hear from the administration.
Mr. Chairman, I just kind of want to give you a little history on our Parks and Recreational area. We currently have 16 permanent employees, 12 seasonal employees that just came on June 9th. They're responsible for 24 ball fields along with Harold Miles Park and the Beagles Club. There have been some issues, as you brought to our attention, and it's also been brought to the attention of the mayor and his staff about the restroom facilities upkeep. I personally visited the parks and looked at some of the problem areas, and we're working for a resolution to that. On last week, I met with all the employees within Parks and Recreation, and I asked that they offer their recommendations and suggestions on improving those the complaints that we received. What could we do to eliminate that? And of course, with the seasonal workers coming on, that's one of the things that we're looking at, is having personnel present during tournament times and ball games to accommodate maybe after every game, having someone go in and clean the restroom facilities. We've also looked at the possibility of outsourcing it to a cleaning company, and there's also a possibility that we can include in our next agreements with maybe some of the ball clubs, including that in their agreement that they be responsible. That may not be a good idea, but we are trying to work through a resolution for that. As I stated, we just got some workers on last week, and we're going to try to do our very best to make sure that that problem that you've heard of in the last month or so won't occur. And if it does, we'll come up with another resolution as far as taking care of that and not making it an issue in the future.
Mr. White, any comments?
Well, I'll tell you, like we talked about, Ms. Lawson and I talked about having, the only way you're gonna do anything with bathrooms at a public facility in a ballpark or something going on, that you have multi-games, multi-times going on, when you go clean one like we do, and I physically go with them a lot of times on Saturday mornings, clean their bathrooms, they're clean. Took Miss Lawson out there after we cleaned them. We took her out there after a night's play and showed her what it looked like. But if you don't have somebody there after that first game on 4 fields, and if it happened to rain that day, you go in that bathroom after the first game, it looks like you haven't cleaned it, because the kids come in there and put their feet up in the lavatory and hose their shoes off, and I mean, there's mud everywhere, and they take toilet paper and get it wet and throw it up at the ceiling. We need somebody, and it's not the first time that we've talked about this. We've needed somebody to do that, but everybody said we can't afford that. But if they want it that way, and if they want that look during the middle of the games, then the only way to do that is to have a young lady and a young man there on premises during the tournaments, and that's their job. In fact, he could actually become a policeman. He could walk in the bathroom, the kids are playing around, say, look, son, or young lady, you need to go back to your mother. This is not a play area. And it's happened for years. It's happened for the 28 years I've been here, I can tell you that.
But I think based on what you just said, and based on the report Ms. Lawson gave from the administration, looking at what we've done in Central Louisiana and the economic impact of all the ball fields, looking at the visitors that we have from different states that surrounds our city and other parishes, I think it should be incumbent upon us to have individuals in place with the research and the mechanism to provide those personnel at those ball fields to make sure that they are maintained and kept up, because, you know, looking at economic impact, but also looking at reputation, looking at what we want to do in attracting tournaments to this region. I think that's a process to go, like Ms. Lawson said, y'all working toward, and I think that's important to our city. Mr. Lawson.
I'm sensitive to this. Jody and I started years ago in Parks and Recreation, and one of the things I did was clean restrooms in the park. But at that time, in working for Mr. Napoleon Johnson, I think we honed in on 1 or 2 parks to clean with two summer workers at that time. There's no way we're gonna make the impression that we ought to make the current staff they have. They've done all they can do. I've asked folk around, and nobody blaming the fact that they're not working out there, the fact that we don't have an adequate staff. Everyone knows you may stop at the service station because they have clean room restrooms. This could cost you a turn. I just spoke earlier today with Dee Dee Edwards, who's working. We have a strong chance of getting the World Series back on the stand with the Dixie Women Youth, which would be 5.
5 World Series.
5 World Series, which is a huge piece. You certainly don't want to lose an opportunity like that because the parents and kids experience a restroom that wasn't pleasing to them. I think we need to address this, address it with a sense of urgency. And I don't want to stop at Johnny Downs Park. I want to look at all the parks throughout the city. And all the parks deserve to have clean restrooms when folk are using them throughout the summer and other parts of the year. I think we need to address it very quickly.
Well, I'll tell you what I've done. I've had, every time we have a big tournament, I got a young lady, the only young lady I have working in my department, and she does that, but she is limited as to what she can do in the men's bathroom. She can go in and out of that ladies' bathroom, and she's there during the tournament. She stays there for all big tournaments, wherever. She goes from Johnny Downs to the complex, back to Johnny Downs, and stays there until the last 3 games get started. And then next morning we come in and clean up after that. But it's something that can help. I mean, like I tell the people, it's not like your home bathroom. You're not the only 2 people that are going in and out of that bathroom. You take 4 games going on, you probably got 100 people in each bathroom in an hour. I mean, that's just one game. You get a 16-game tournament, 16 hours. It can get kind of bad.
Yeah, we're trying to be creative in our approach too. I've also discussed with them the possibility of getting the automatic flushers for the toilets. So you want to have people like stepping on it. And also when they leave out, it automatically flushes, and you won't have possibility, hopefully anyway, of the toilets being overflowed with toilet tissue and paper towels and things of that sort. We've also discussed changing the type of paper that we use in our paper towel dispenser. Because some of them, they pull down 2 or 3, and it's kind of a waste, so we're addressing that as well, and we're looking at changing some of the product lines. So we're trying to be creative, not just from a personnel standpoint, but also from a standpoint of being logical and what will work and be less costly.
Right, and also just beyond just restroom and bathroom, something about the garbage cans, the dumpsters, all those measures that give that impression when visitors come to our city, use those complexes the way we look.
Well, they built the complex out at Johnny Downs, and I know the administration here wasn't involved in it. As a recreation person, I became involved in it much later on the planning, and it's not well planned as far as what you just said, dumpsters and stuff. You got one small dumpster, and the garbage truck came back in it without tearing the wall down. I mean, things like that. Maybe if somebody, if they ever build another one, they need to get somebody on there that says, well, that's not going to work. You need a little more room for this. And that's like the paper towel holders, the ones they put, they don't work. I mean, you pull one, the whole thing comes out. I mean, this is things that we're changing that's going to help there. But there's a lot of things that can be done, but it's, you got to put the money up, make sure you want to do it, and pay for it and get it done.
Okay, so can y'all come back with a request or report for what we need to do to make it happen as soon as we can?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Can I
thank
have one more thing to say?
Okay, Ms. Lawson.
This may not be appropriate, but since he's here, this is Jody's last meeting as an official city employee coming here. He's going to be retiring June 30th. And so I just wanted to make that known to the councilman in case you didn't know it. We do have a great appreciation for the years of services, 28 if I'm not mistaken, for the city. So I commend him highly, and I appreciate what he's done for our city and our community.
May not be able to pay you, but we can applaud you, Joe.
Council, gentlemen, we're going to have an event too that's coming up, so I'll send a notice to all of you about everything honoring
I
Joe.
understand he has size 32 shoes.
I
It's gonna be hard to fill.
I don't know, there's plenty of people out there can handle it. I told the mayor I'd be here if he needed me.
All right, Joe.
Okay, thank you for that report. Moving to item number 2, to hear from the administration concerning the Alexandria City's retirement system. At this time, we hear from the administration.
Mr. Johnson? Hello. Yes, there are several items that we wanted to bring up that are informative issues that the administration felt was important to bring up. The overall condition of the City of Alexandria retirement system is in good shape. Mr. Kern has issued some reports to the last meeting of the retirement board. They reported that the city's rate of contribution will be going down slightly during the next term, which is actually about a year from now. But that shows a continual trend. The investments made are continuing to show good returns. On other points, the administration has been working on matters dealing with insurance, Mr. Johnson, and I think you wanted me to go into that to some extent. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's our understanding that the health insurance benefits for the city workers have gone up, and at this point, the administration has worked with its budget office and with the insurance committee to consider what the employees' allocations are. We have not changed at this point the allocation of the retirees' contributions. If you recall, gentlemen, the retirees are offered the right to participate in our group insurance for health insurance purposes. This is a very important right for those individuals. Mr. Crutchfield can give you more as to the percentages. The retirees pay a very significant portion of their cost. I think it's around 90%. With this new increase, the administration is really going to have to look at what that increase will mean for the retirees. And Mr. Johnson wanted me to bring this up because at this point, the decisions have been made to have a 3% increase on current active employees who choose to participate. We cover about 85% of the active employees' active employees' health insurance benefits. Because of the rapid increases that everyone is experiencing, not just the City of Alexandria, some increase to active employees was deemed necessary. The city's picking up a lion's share of that. As far as the retirees, because they spend a much higher percentage, it makes a difference. The administration, Mr. Crutchfield, has recommended that there be some consideration given to this, and perhaps at the next council meeting, the administration could come back and give a full report on the actual cost. Does that sound appropriate, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, that's appropriate for the committee.
I spoke to Mr. Richard Moriarty, advised him that this item was coming up. The concern with the retirees, of course, is they need to know in advance what items are. Most of our employees who were not Medicare eligible have now rotated through the system, but we still have a few that must depend on the city's retirement the city's hospitalization plan for that very important benefit. We have other employees who decide to leave city employment, say at 48 or 50 years of age. They are not Medicare eligible until they are 63, 64 years old, 62. And those individuals are likewise also dependent on the city's plan that is offered to those retirees. Mr. Johnson felt it was very important, wanted you gentlemen to know that he and Ms. Siraj and Mr. Crutchfield are looking at this
and Mr. Crutchfield feels that within the next 2 weeks, he can come back and give a full report.
Question, you got one question, Mr. Lawson? Mr.
Yes.
Lawson.
I want to just reemphasize. I need some energize, I guess. that you know, our retirees are the ones that have been most faithful to the city. And if we can afford not to put that burden on them with the 3% you suggested?
No, the 3% was what was put on the current employees. That's the reason the committee didn't want to do anything without y'all knowing about it.
Right.
Because it's, the active retirees are paying around 85% of the premium, and that's a pretty good burden on a lot of those families.
And their checks are not going up like many of our active employees' checks are.
They don't necessarily get the cost of living.
I'm just saying that I hope that we all share that, you know, that they're paying a hefty enough portion as it stands right now, the retirees. And I think we ought to try to honor their service as much as we can, particularly when it comes to not putting that burden on the ones that have been so dedicated.
And Mr. Lawson, that's been a consensus among the individuals in the administration and also by Mr. Johnson, but there is a fiscal impact, and we have to budget that. And now that we have the new health insurance premium numbers, that was one thing Ms. Siraj was particularly interested in. She sits on both the insurance committee as well as on the board with Mr. Crutchfield of the retirees, along with the mayor, and they want to make sure that what is done is equitable.
Okay, any other questions? I'd like to thank you, Mr. Gibbs, for that report, and I think in 2 weeks, if we can come back, you and Mr. Crutchfield, to review those
Yes, sir.
figures and numbers, I think that'll be adequate for this committee.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Item number 1, that I don't see Interfaith present to hear from Interfaith.
Mr. Johnson, I have a meeting scheduled with them on Thursday, so they'll probably come back at the next time after they meet with us. We got bumped. We had a meeting scheduled last week, and because of the special council meeting on Tuesday, it got messed up. So I think probably you'll hear from them next week after they meet with the administration.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else to come before this committee? If not, this committee is adjourned. Thank you very much.
I'd like to call the Public Safety and Transportation Committee to order. President, myself, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Silver's absent. Mr. Fowler, Mr. Lawson, members of council. Item number 1 is to hear an update from the administration on the mayor's recommendation concerning the vehicle policy.
Mr. Marshall, we presented a report to this panel earlier, and at that time, we had eliminated 47 take-home vehicles for the city personnel. Since that time, we have allowed a process for appeals. We received 22 appeals. We've met with the panel that reviewed the appeals. We've discussed this with the division heads and the relevant people involved. And after reviewing that, we have granted 10 of the appeals on people that were first responders or they had special equipment in their vehicles to perform tasks that were necessary on an emergency basis. At the end of the month, on June 20th, all take-home vehicles will be collected, and some of them, which is the last Friday of this month, some of them will be pooled as pool vehicles. Others will be used by the same workers, but only during the day as they perform their tasks during regular work hours.
That's the 30th. On 30. Mr. Johnson?
When we look at police, fire, and maybe doing storm utility vehicles, based on those appeals, in that lineup, what do we consider first responders other than those 3 entities? Police, fire, utilities, I'm sure there's a storm, there's a fire, those entities respond and they go out to put out, turn off power, those respective homes. What do we consider first responders based on decisions? that was made.
First responders are those people that are on call, and supervisors that are on call for all of the utility services, the street services, the street department, all of those public works entities.
That have an obligation to be there either first or as a supervisor, or are required by statute to do so by existing state law or ordinances by this body. We gave a lengthier definition many meetings back when we first initiated all this, and if you'd like, we can go upstairs and get that definition and either do it now, or we can do it in the general meeting and let the body know.
Just of it, just there.
Yeah, personally, I still feel we got a lot of them going on. We might have too many even when we speak of first responders. And my concern is this, say in the winter, and say the bridges freeze over. If we have assets north of the river and they can't get back on this side of the river, what good are those assets to the citizens of Alexandria?
That was one of the criteria that we addressed, Mr. Marshall. If you recall, there were three. There was an amount of mileage geographically that they couldn't go without or outside of. Then there was the first responder status, and then thirdly, there was whether they carried equipment with them that would preclude or hinder their ability to respond to situations. This process that we went through, we reviewed it probably 3 separate times. Ms. McGill's reviewed it on her own once. I reviewed them on my own. The process that we voted, we recorded on each appeal a vote. I didn't vote at all unless there was a tie. The committee was Mr. Johnson, Marcus Cannella, Mr. Crutchfield, and Ms. McGill. So in the case of a 2-2 tie, and we didn't agree on all of them, I voted. Otherwise, that's what occurred. So as objective a process as you can have, we did. I don't know what else we could do to be more objective in how we approached the take-home car situation.
And, you know, when we say take-home cars, Mr. Marshall, we're not really referring to cars. It's vehicles like flusher trucks, which are huge vehicles. That's not a vehicle someone's going to abuse and be driving to the movie theater with their family. But when someone's sewer backs up, they're going to be real happy that guy had that thing parked out in front of his house, and they can get over there to the emergency to respond within just a few minutes, rather than having to get in their own vehicle, drive out to the compound, pick up this truck, and then take it back out to the south side of town. We really carefully considered who should have a vehicle at home. When we have a crew that's on call for a particular utility, we only have the crew leader taking a vehicle home, a work truck. And when the crew leader gets there and assesses the situation, if he needs backup, he calls his 2 support people that are on call, and they travel to the scene in their personal vehicles. They don't have take-home vehicles. So we really have cut it to the bare bones as far as we're concerned, without negatively affecting our ability to respond to power outages, to water issues, to sewer issues.
Yes, just one other aspect. In those concerns of vehicle policy, did we address the mechanism of family versus insurance according to policy that the city has in place in regards to city vehicles? For example, family riding in a city vehicle based on any measure of them going to a store or them going to the shop, because there is policy, you know, in a lot of instances in government, and in governments, not only just government, but other areas where...
On June 30, yes, sir. We did address it, and on June 30, when we issued the final memorandum to the employees, it will include revisions to internal policies within the city about vehicles. Mr. Johnson, just to give you an example of one that we debated a good bit today, if you have a person, for example, that is supposed to take home a vehicle in his own call and is a first responder, and they are on call on a weekend, particularly a Sunday, and that person takes that vehicle and goes to church, which has happened. Some folks would criticize that at first blush and say, what is a vehicle doing at church? And there's an argument to be made for that and why. The other argument, though, that I agree with is that if you're on call, you have to be on call anyway. We're not asking you to stay at home. You don't have to stay at home if you're on call for the city. We're not going to stop you from going to church. And if you, just like the fire engines, people see them around town parked. If they go anywhere, the fire engine has to go.
Right.
If they go shopping, the fire engine has to go because they have to respond. So there's that on the one end of the spectrum, Mr. Johnson. On the other end, it's people taking a city vehicle and going shopping when a spouse or a significant other or someone else should do it, or they should just do it on other time. Is shopping really that bad? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But there is a perception out there, and we want to make sure that people respect the policy and what we're doing. So what we're going to do is say, you're not going to shop in the vehicles, but if you go to church because you're on call in a vehicle, there may be exceptions where that should be permissible. Even though at first blush it seems if you pass by a church and see a city vehicle, you can't understand why you do that. But you can't take your family to church in the vehicle. So there are some things that we have to consider for each case.
My personal feelings are is the vehicle policy has never given me a lot of heartburn. I think in the overall spectrum of the city, the use of the vehicles has been not insignificant, but not a great expense for the city. And if we err on this, I would certainly want to err to the side of service to the citizenry, where a person would have his vehicle, tools, whatever. And all of there are 9 billion hypotheticals that we can put out there, what ifs. But the biggest what if to me is what if they're called? What if they're needed? What if they don't show up and you're the one that needed them? Whether it's a sewer backing up or your lights are out or whatever. I would rather err to the side of service. And I think that the administration has shown that they've done due diligence in critiquing each of these vehicles, and I think that I would like to endorse what they've done, and I appreciate the work that they've done.
Mr. Marshall, to ensure, we're going to go back through the grants, the appeals that were granted even in part, and make sure they all comply with the geographic requirement as well. One more time.
But, Mayor, I think what Mr. Johnson might have been alluding to, and I think maybe you probably already have it in your argument, is that sometimes citizens have seen people taken with their families to the grocery store and all of this. And that's what a complaint is, or going to a part-time job, you know. If you're going to a part-time job, evidently you can't be on call for the city. So why should you have a city vehicle at a part-time job? Make sense?
And that's
Actually, Mr. Marshall, no. The point is, let's say you have a job on the weekend and you want to go work at your office on Sunday and you're on call. No one can say, again, like church, that you can't leave your house. So if you have to take your emergency vehicle to your job on Sunday where you're permitted to work, then actually in that scenario you just gave, you should be able to take the call.
But under no circumstances
have
are
family.
employees supposed to take their families in their vehicles. And unfortunately, there's always going to be somebody that abuses the privilege and violates the policy, and those people have to be dealt with when we learn of their violation.
We're not going to allow anybody to make money, Mr. Marshall, on city time and with city equipment. That's what
That's what I'm alluding to.
That's what we won't allow.
That's what I'm alluding to.
We won't allow that.
Mr. Tom?
Well, and the other thing, I think each and every city vehicle is marked by a sticker on the door and has a number on it. If there are abuses by these vehicles that are observed by the citizenry, then they can report to anyone in the administration or anyone on the council.
And they get reported, Mr. Bynum.
I know they do.
Ms. Lawson had one reported where the vehicle was seen all over town. We investigated it. It was actually a vehicle sold that they had failed. They always take off a decal, so you had a person driving around town that wanted the decals still there. I don't know why, but
In all seriousness, we've all gotten calls on that, and when we do, anytime I've gotten a call on that, I've given it to the administration, given the vehicle number if I was given that, when it was seen, where it was seen, and what the person that saw it perceived that the driver of the vehicle was doing. And I think with that, I think we have a good vehicle policy, and it'll be an ongoing thing, and I think we'll need to review it. And I just don't see the great amount of abuse or expense that we would be willing to cut in order to cut services at the same time. So, that's just me.
Anything else?
Mr. Marshall, since this is the public safety meeting, if you just give me a moment. Last night in Charleston, South Carolina, the city suffered a tremendous tragedy when they lost 9 firefighters in a fire. And I'd like to ask that all of us remember those men and their families. And I can tell you that this morning when I got up and was getting dressed to go to work and saw that on TV, my heart just sunk because I realized that could be us on any given day. And in the short time we've been in this administration, the mayor and I and Mr. Johnson have worked with our fire department, and we've come to know them very well and to love them and respect them for the men that they are. They are all dedicated heroes who every day put their lives on the line. They take over 5,000 calls a year. Many of those are EMS calls, and we've heard their praises sung time and time again for the comfort that they bring on their EMS calls. And just in the short time that we've been here, in the 6 months or so, they've been engaged in a number of serious fires that they've been called to fight, fires that claimed the lives of several of our innocent citizens and threatened the lives of our firefighters. And I don't want to wait until something tragic happens to our guys before we let them know how much we appreciate what they do and honor them. And so I'd like for you all to give our firefighters just a big round of applause and thank them when you see them for the job that they do.
Chief say, what about me?
He gets his at staff, believe me.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
Go ahead and call Economic Development Committee meeting to order. Item number 1 is we're going to delay it. We're still working on some of the language, and then also there's a bill in the legislature that we certainly need to monitor that may supersede anything that we may do anyway. So we're going to wait to see what the legislature does, and hopefully we'll be able to come back with something within a month's time, shortly after the legislative session would end. Item number 2 is discuss proposals for the development of the downtown mini park. This was something, I guess it's been a little pet peeve of mine. You go to downtown Baton Rouge and it's anchored by the Shaw Center where you see the cascading water that shoots up and all other things. It's a very beautiful piece and encourages people to dine outside and just to go and hang around. And I'd like to see something similar to that in our downtown area that would be an attraction not only for those that live here, but those that visit our downtown area. We really need to add as many attractions as possible and certainly branch out into the communities as we were talking about doing with the spray park. This wouldn't be a spray park per se, but more of a fountain that folk could sit back and enjoy dinner with that being in the environment. Item number, so I'm asking the administration to come back.
We'll get some plans together.
Okay. Item number 3 is discuss the government access channel. This is placed on the agenda. I think we need to certainly do as much as we can to dress up the government access channel, develop policies and procedures that are consistent, In addition to that, take it to another level. I've spoken with Mr. White, and he has some great ideas, and we anticipate maybe having some of that on paper in the very near future. And it's going to involve schools within our community utilizing the equipment and some of their equipment within their school system. So if folk are fishing on Mr. Marshall's pier out there, and most folk don't even know where the pier is, this channel will be able to go out there and expose all the offerings out there, expose offerings in Compton Park or Franklin Hunter Park. So I guess what I'm asking is that we all get together and take this to another level. When I got here and it's done better, it was just a blue screen. And I think we had a video running that was quite dated, and I think it's been pulled now, but we need to go ahead and get something back on the channel that's going to be an attraction for those that are in the hotel rooms, and encourage them to get out of the hotel rooms and see the various attractions such as the zoos, the zoo we have here, and other things that we have to offer. Just a thought, Mr. Marshall.
You know, along those same lines, you know, we got a jogging trail along the levee on the other side, along the road. But we never accentuate it. It's just that. You know, people come along here in Alexandria, if they know about it, they go over and use it.
True, that's good.
And we've had a bicycle races here last month, a couple of weeks ago. And things like that, if we got our trails together and put them all in perspective, why not maybe do something along the river and then curve it into our green belt that we spend quite a bit of money on trying to enhance it and keep it clean and manicured. Let's accentuate what we already have.
Well, it's going to require an investment, and I think we need to make it, because if you look at it right now, you know, your hotel room, and I asked if you don't remember specifically, this start broadcasting in all the hotel rooms to encourage people to get out of the room. If you look at the channel now, what's encouraging to those that's looking at it and get them out of the room? And my thing is to have folk that are visiting, but certainly those of you talking about that live here, to see the many, many attractions. If folk knew what's within the confines of my high school, Peabody Magnet High School, the equipment and various other offerings, they would be very, very shocked, and other schools as well. But I'd like to see a very, very aggressive approach to utilizing this government access channel. I want to reiterate, use that correctly too. There are restrictions that we definitely need to make sure that we adhere to with this channel, but I'm anxious to see something come back to the council, and any ideas that we haven't. I know our staff has done as much as they can with the limited resources they have to take this to the level it is right now. Mr. Fowler.
I don't know, but this may be on the agenda because I requested it. Is that not the case, Mr. Hobbs, or do you know?
I put it on there.
Oh, you did? Well, I'd asked for it too, in a letter to Mr. Hobbs, and I was unable to attend the finish of the meeting last week, our special executive session meeting, due to the fact I had to go back to work. So I wasn't able to attend, and I called Mrs. Fields and asked her when I might observe that meeting in its entirety on our access channel. Was informed that it was not going to be shown, and I asked her why, and she told me Mr. Hobbs had directed that it not be shown. I called Mr. Hobbs, well, I asked her to call Mr. Hobbs, and I asked that it be put on to be shown because I wanted to see it. He informed her that a straw vote had been taken amongst the council members and elected not to show that meeting. Am I incorrect on anything so far? Okay.
You're incorrect.
Well, I may be incorrect, but this is what was said to me, and I think that the citizens of Alexandria, one, deserve to see all of our meetings in their entirety. I did not vote not to show it. In fact, I'd like to have a formal vote tonight whether we show it or not. And I think it should be a policy of this council that all of our meetings, if they're not an executive session meeting, but a meeting that occurs as a public meeting, that it be, even if it's a short meeting, that it be tagged along at the regular times that we show the regular council meetings in their entirety, just at the end of that meeting, where the public can see what we're doing as far as their business is concerned. I was rather upset and received several calls, folk that wanted to see that meeting. I directed them to come down here. They could review it on TV or whatever, but it wasn't going to be shown. I feel like it should have been shown and still should be shown, and if there was an opportunity tonight, I'll vote, as I think we all should do, to show it.
Well, that's one of the reasons I put it on. The problem is we don't have a policy as it relates to, and when I asked the president about it, because we talked briefly about it, I don't think we ever replay, that I know of, special meetings as we have the previous meetings. So when you talk about being consistent, you're exactly right. I think we should be consistent. And I have no problem certainly broadcasting any meeting that we have.
The reason we were consistent, because the reason it wasn't shown was because we've never shown special council meeting. We never had a lengthy discussion in a special call meeting in the first place. So usually we go in executive session, we come back, city attorney would either say what went on, where we're going, and that was the end. So it was never no use of playing back something that never was. There was the first lengthy special meeting that we would call for executive session. Okay, in the past, as long as I've been here, and I've been here on 13 years, we've never done it. But we do not have a policy saying whether we do or don't. When it was called to my attention, I asked each council person that was present at the time. No one wanted to break the tradition that we had, and so we went on with it.
Well, I wasn't present, nor did I vote.
That's correct.
Anyway, what I'm asking is that we change the policy and that we show those meetings, even if they're already short.
We're on the same page. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up, because I know we need to conclude some things, but
Can we ask that you place that meeting on the next time Channel 4 is shown, that in front of this meeting, we have that meeting? I have a letter from Mr. Hobbs, June 15, that states, as Mr. Fowler said, it was the decision of the majority of the council not to air said council meeting. So Mr. Fowler stated that correctly. There was a decision by the majority of the council.
I think
I
what he said
wrote on
was
June
strong.
14 and 15.
He wasn't here, and he's the only one.
I understand, but that's a decision made not in a public meeting.
Well, we don't rehash it. I don't have a problem. It's certainly been up to the prerogative of the president, and we'll change that if we need to. But we're gonna be-
Mr. Lawson
but what we
hasn't-
are going to do is be consistent, I think, is what he's suggesting. What you're suggesting is that we be inconsistent.
No, I'm suggesting that from this day forward, that we show any special meeting tagged along with the meeting, the regular scheduled meeting that occurred.
And I don't disagree with that.
And to show this last one simply because it was, it had so much notoriety.
There was a lengthy discussion, as the gentleman pointed out, which should make it shown so the public can see it. I'd ask that the body, I can't make you do it, but I'd ask that you entertain a motion to show that, despite any policy or not. And if you don't want to do that, I think you should tell the public why.
Okay.
And by the way, for the public, we have a transcript compiled of that meeting, and we'll be offering it at the per-page limits established by law. So if people would like to read a transcript of the meeting that the council is refusing to show, they can contact my office, and I'll be glad to provide them a transcript of this very, very important public meeting that is not being aired.
That's mighty presumptuous. You just say that the council's refusing to show it before we discuss it, firstly. Secondly, why didn't you ask for the previous meetings to be aired, since you're asking us to deviate from the norm now?
Because I never knew that there was a meeting that wasn't aired, Mr.
Well,
Lawson.
if you're gonna be
It's not
consistent.
presumptuous at all. I never knew it, and you just were going to gavel the meeting down, and Mr. Hobbs said that was the policy.
No, I said it's
This
the
letter says it
prerogative
wasn't
of
going to
the
be shown.
president, is what I suggested.
Okay, and I think that there's a contract that has an open access provision that doesn't allow it
But
to be the
what we are
prerogative
going
of
to
one
do is be the
person.
council, and that's going to be the council's decision, Mayor, okay?
Okay.
Any other business need to come before Economic Development Committee?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Lawson, I have a fact sheet entitled "An Ordinance Authorizing the Mayor to Enter into an Intergovernmental Agreement with the Alexandria Pineville Area Convention and Visitors Bureau to promote tourism, recreation, and economic development in the city of Alexandria."
Said all that to say what?
Just wanted to introduce that. Mr. Lawson,
The problem is I don't have a forum in this committee, so we can send it to the general, which is the other issue that I want to suggest as to why we're having a quagmire here. Well, that we have no quorum in this committee, legal counsel. Can you correct me if we do?
you don't.
Okay, thank you.
You have the correct legal opinion.
All right. Anything else? All right, that concludes the Economic Development Committee.
To order, Tuesday, June 19, 2007. I have an invocation by Mr. Johnson and a pledge by Mr. Fowler.
Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, creator and maker of every good and perfect gift, I ask that you would have a special blessing on our city, this administration, our city council, this community at large. Bless each and every one of us in your own special way. These we ask in our Son Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's go to D, roll call. Ms. Steele.
Mr. Marshall.
Present.
Mr. Fowler.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Present.
Mr. Lawson. Mr. Silver. And Mr. Smith. Mr. Hobbs.
Here. Okay, before we go to E, agenda requests, I'd ask Mr. Hess, would you come to the mic?
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. I'd like to introduce to you someone that I'm very familiar with. That would be my wife, Bobby Hess, who would like to address City Council as Director of Development for St. Mary's Residential Training Center.
We just wanted to take a moment of the time. I have two of St. Mary's, some of our, what we call our ambassadors, and they wanted to come to a city council meeting today and to give you all a special pin and to thank the city for all the support that they show to St. Mary's. And this is Ashley, and this is Chris. And Ashley, if you want to go, and then Chris, you go over and give some pins.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Pin?
Thank you, Chris.
If you would, if you could leave one for our councilmen that are not here tonight, I know they would be proud to get one.
Thank you.
Okay. We appreciate it, thank you. Okay, now we will go to E, agenda requests.
Okay. 7, the Public Works and Zoning, 16, 17, and 18, the Public Works and Zoning. 20 and 21, I'd like to have those pulled and send to legal or somewhere. Let's see what, who on those.
It's in the legal.
Legal.
It's in the legal.
Legal. 10, 11, and 12 for legal. You got 13 public works, 7, 9, and 13.
Legal. 13 legal. Oh, okay.
13, Public Works.
No public. You got it?
I move.
Let me read it.
Wait, you gotta read it, make sure we got it.
7, 9, and 13 to Public Works. 10, 11, and 12 goes to legal. 16, 17, and 18 to Public Works. And 20 and 21 to legal.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Okay, now I need the motion.
Need a motion?
So move.
I did, I made a
Oh, you
motion.
move.
Okay.
Lewis seconded it.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Fowler, second by Mr. Marshall. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries. And we'll go to G, ordinance for final adoption, subject to public hearing.
Number 33, to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing the mayor to accept the low bid submitted for annual inspection, testing, and certification of breakers and transformers for DG Hunter Generating Station.
Move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Fowler, second by Mr. Johnson. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Number 34, to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing the mayor to accept the low bid submitted for fire hydrants and related accessories for a 6-month period.
Move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Marshall. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Mr. President, item number 35 needs to be delayed for 2 weeks. 36 is to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing acceptance of a utility servitude located in Lot 2 of Fleur-de-Lis subdivision.
Move.
Moved by Mr. Fowler, second by Mr. Marshall. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Number 37, to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a written cooperative endeavor agreement with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Louisiana to attend the summer camp held at the Alexandria branch located at 1801 Sylvester Street.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Marshall, second by Mr. Johnson. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Number 38, to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a written cooperative endeavor agreement with Alexandria Senior High School to attend the sports camp held at Ash during the months of June and July as part of Alexandria's recreational and educational programs.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Fowler, second by Mr. Johnson. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Number 39, to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a written cooperative endeavor agreement with WLM Aquatic School to provide a summer recreational swimming program for the city's youth at Peabody Magnet High School.
Move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Fowler, second by Mr. Johnson. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Number 40, to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections for inmate services.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Marshall, second by Mr. Fowler. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Number 41, to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing change orders number 1 and 2 with Chain Electric Company for Claremont and Charles Park subdivision cable replacement.
Move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Fowler, second by Mr. Johnson. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Item number 42 is delayed.
Mr. President, before you go into the public hearings, the administration has a couple of fact sheets which we ask that you refer to the legal committee. The first one is a fact sheet titled, "An Ordinance Authorizing the Mayor to Enter into an Intergovernmental Agreement with the Alexandria Pineville Area Convention and Visitors Bureau to promote tourism, recreation, and economic development in the city of Alexandria."
Move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Fowler, second by Mr. Johnson.
The next one is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a cooperative endeavor agreement with Caddo Parish to allow the purchase of vehicles from the city of Alexandria on the city's contract.
Move. Second.
The next
That's a
is,
resolution,
It's the ordinance.
ordinance, okay.
that's ordinance.
Okay.
The next one is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Christopher W. Williams for a historical preservation survey.
Move.
Second.
And the last is a resolution authorizing request for qualifications from an interested firm or design professional to enter into an agreement for professional services with the city for the design, contract administration, and construction observation services for recreational water spray parks.
Move.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Fowler, seconded by
Foster.
Mr.
Last one's a resolution.
Yeah, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to H, public hearing on community development.
To continue the public hearing on structure located at 335 North 16th Street, Julia Dozot Estate, the Community Development Department requests a continuation till August 28th on this structure.
Are they being expanded?
No.
What's the recommendation on it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Continue.
well,
Continuation.
Okay, okay. August one, yeah.
Okay,
I'll move.
Second.
okay, moved by Mr. Fowler, seconded by Mr. Marshall. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, public hearing is now closed. We'll go to our committees.
Finance Committee, Mr. Lawson. Public Works, Mr. Silver, no report. Legal Committee, Mr. Smith, has no report. Utility, Mr. Fowler.
No report.
Community Development, Mr. Marshall.
No report.
Personnel Insurance, Mr. Johnson.
No report.
Public Safety, Mr. Marshall.
No report.
A&E Review, Mr. Fowler.
No report.
Economic Development, Mr. Lawson, has no report.
Okay. On the sign-in, I have one person, Mrs. Bridget Brown. She wants to discuss agenda items 20 through 30.
Mr. President, I would not discuss all items, and I'll wait until
The next committee meeting, okay, all right. Okay, any other business come before the council?
Yeah, I had one piece of business we discussed in committee. That was the use of our Channel 4. I'd like to make a motion that we change our policy to show each and every meeting that the council has as a special meeting, to piggyback that with the regular council meeting, and show that on our public access so the folks in Alexandria see what we're doing. I make that a motion.